Okay, so I'm going to try to do a quick video on tax reform and just the history of taxes, and hopefully my son is in the other room watching something, so I'm really hoping he stays in there so I can just finish this video real quick. I'm going to try to make it interesting and factual as possible, and just try to make some important points about taxes. So one point I want to make is that you do not have the right, the God-given right, to someone else's money. You don't have a right to it. Like for healthcare, you can say healthcare is a right, but remember, if it's a right to have somebody else pay for it, that means you have a right to take someone else's money to pay for your own healthcare. Now you can say it's the right thing to do. You can try to make an argument or case that it's, something that needs to be done, but you cannot call it a right to literally take money from someone else just because they make more money than you. To pay for something for yourself, regardless of how noble the cause is. You don't have a right to someone else's money. So, and it's not in the Constitution. You won't find it in the Constitution. Article 1, Section 8 and 9 also talk about how the Congress has the power to collect taxes, but that it should be done at a uniform rate. It should be uniform. So, regardless of how much money or income you have, it would be the same rate for everyone across the board. And that was seen as fair. Even if everybody was taxed at 10%, somebody who makes a lot more money is going to pay a lot more taxes. There's my son. So anyways, keep that in mind, that they'd still be paying a lot more because they make more. The percentage it doesn't matter the percentage. They're still going to be paying more based on their income. So anyways, that's just an interesting point to make about the Constitution. So this idea of a progressive tax did not start being discussed until the late 1800s. And this was when in 1894 there was a tax or a law passed where it was targeting wealthier citizens to pay a higher percentage. Well, it got struck down in the Supreme Court and ruled unconstitutional. So, that's just fascinating to me that it, was ruled unconstitutional. And I think that makes sense. So it wasn't until 1913 with the 16th Amendment where there was a progressive tax implemented and also an income tax. There was income tax. So that was new. There used to not be an income tax. So anyways, and then from 1913, the tax code went from 400 pages to over 70,000 pages. That is insane. That is crazy. I can only imagine how much corruption and special deals are in 70,000 pages. And there's a quote from James Madison, who said, "It will be of little avail to the people that the laws are made by men of their own of their own choosing, if the laws be so voluminous that they cannot be read, or so incoherent that they cannot be understood." And that is so true of the tax code. What normal average person is going to read through 70,000 pages or understand it? Who knows? I'm sure a lot of it is not even easy to understand. It's probably that way on purpose. So that's why we have tax lawyers. So that's all they study is the law, the tax laws. So anyways, it's no doubt confusing or purposely made difficult to understand for the average citizen, and that is something that it should not be. It should be simplified. It should be more fair across the board. No special deals. Just this, the same applied to everybody. So let me just make sure. I wanted to make a point about. Let's see. And I wanted to make the point about how taxes used to be actually the percentage of the GDP for taxes collected used to be higher at the state and local levels than the federal level. And obviously that switched in the 1930s when tax rates, when there was, income tax implemented, and then there was progressive tax rates. So, there used to be more power at the state and local, or influence, whatever you want to say, at the state and local governments compared to the federal government, and that power has shifted over time. And you can see that even just with taxes, how taxes have been implemented and shifted more to the federal government. So that's something else to keep in mind. It used to be, switched. Local and state governments used to collect at a higher percentage of the GDP than the federal level. So, anyways, I wanted to make the point also that when it comes to lowering the corporate tax rate, it is not greedy, it is not corrupt to want to lower the tax rate for businesses in general. And that doesn't, the corporate tax rate is not just for big corporations. That's what people don't always think about that. It's also for small businesses. There are smaller businesses that have a higher, oh, my son, trying to keep him out of here. There are smaller businesses that are taxed by they have a corporate tax rate. So it's not just these huge businesses that are, frankly, getting a lot of special deals, which, we should end some of those, get rid of a lot of those loopholes. But this affects smaller businesses too. But, we need to compete globally. We need to compete with other countries to attract businesses to come back to the United States, to also attract more businesses to start and to grow. Even there's socialist countries that have a lower corporate tax rate than we do. To me, it's common sense just to want to lower it to be more competitive. And even Canada has a 15% tax rate. Think about how, we have over twice the tax rate for the corporate tax rate than Canada. So that's just an interesting point too. But we need to, it's not greedy, it's not corrupt. My husband and I don't, we're just average Americans. We don't make a ton of money. I agree that we need to lower the corporate tax rate. That doesn't mean I'm in the pocket of big corporations or that. I have no interest in. There's no conflict of interest for me, but I believe it's best to lower the corporate tax rate for many reasons. So, I do get tired of the blaming or accusing, rather, of anybody who wants to lower the corporate tax rate that somehow that is, greedy or corrupt. I don't understand how that's the case. So, I wanted to make the point now about Reagan and how, when he got into office in 1982, that the tax rate was at 70%. The highest tax bracket was at 70%, and then it was like that for a couple decades. In fact, even before the few decades before that, in the 1940s, it got as high as 94%. So, anyways, it was at 70% for a few decades before Reagan got in. Then he cut, along with Congress, cut taxes to the top bracket was down to 50%, and it was like that for a few years, and then eventually went down to 28%. I believe that was in 1986, probably. So, what's important to understand is that the revenue, the government revenue, increased each year after that. Even though taxes were cut drastically, the revenue increased. And that's probably because it incentivized people to, it encouraged economic growth, which makes sense. If you're going to tax the fire out of somebody, they're less likely to want to invest or grow or, work hard to become more successful. So, and an interesting fact is that, make sure I get this right, total revenues from all federal taxes averaged 17.8% of the GDP in the 1980s, the gross domestic product, versus 17.4% in the 1970s. So think about how drastic of a cut that was, and yet the federal taxes were averaged to be a higher percent of the GDP than in the 1970s. That's kind of astounding to me, but it makes sense to me. But to make the point that you can still cut taxes, and we can argue about what level they should be cut to, but you can still cut taxes and have revenue increase. It's possible, and it's been proven in the past to work. So, lastly, I just want to point out that as far as the accusation that the rich aren't paying their fair share, just give you some figures here. Currently, the top 1% of income earners, those who have an annual gross income of just under $500,000 or higher, pay 39% of all federal income taxes. That's a lot for just the top 1%. Then the top 10% of income earners, those who have an adjusted gross income of over 138,000 pay about 70% of all the federal income tax. So 1.7 million Americans, which is less than 1% of our actual population, pays 70% of the federal income taxes. Then the bottom 50%, the lower 50% of income earners, those who make just under $40,000 or less, pay 2.8% of the federal income taxes. And the Tax Policy Center estimates that 45.5% of the households in America will not pay federal income tax this year. So my question is, how much more fair would you say, I mean, how much more percentage of the taxes would you say is fair that the wealthier people in this country pay? How much more would be fair? And how much less do you think that the people making a certain amount, on the lower end should pay to make it fair? I already think it's, I'm not sure how you could argue it's not fair currently. You could actually make the case the other way, that it's unfair that, the top income earners are paying 70% of the, a bulk of the taxes in this country. So they're already paying a good amount. It's not like they're not. I mean, they are paying a fair, quote unquote, fair share already. So anyways, hopefully I made enough sense there. I tried to get some tax history in there, Constitution, try to lay, make the case for why lowering taxes is not a bad thing. I think you've got to do it the right way so you can get the right amount of income in the short term and make it, so you can have, my son, so you can get economic growth in the long term where it'll continue to generate more revenue. So I understand there's a balance, but, I'll be right there, honey. Sure, just a minute. Okay. So anyways, just wanted to make the case that it's possible to lower taxes, still generate more revenue, and have the revenue we need to pay for certain things. And it's important for the economy to grow in order to get more revenue for a long, sustainable time. So anyways, I could tell my son's bothering me. So that's all I wanted to say about taxes. I'm sure there's more I could say. But I just wanted to generate some conversation about it and just use some facts for you to base your opinion on. So until next time, God bless, and just try to use some common sense when you're thinking about these issues. All right, bye.